I'm going to show you some pictures. I went back to the beginning of this project. I mean, we're not going to go through all of these pictures because I have 128 pages, but for the sake of some of you who have seen these things before, I just want to make sure you kind of can get a visual. And if I go over something here tonight in this scope of work that you aren't really familiar with, and I don't like to pause and show you some pictures, raise your hand and say, hey, I'm not sure what you're talking about when you say shoring. Okay, so here we go. Cutoff time is now. If you haven't turned anything in to me on this, I'm not going to grade it. Okay, here we go. So this project, by the way, was a remodel of an existing building. I think I've already gone over some of this with you. So most of the structure was there. There's not a lot of excavation or anything like that. There is some demo and some specific excavation for a little bit of concrete work that had to be done. But as far as site grading and all of that, we didn't have any of that. We did have some saw cut and removal of some parking lot, but it was already there. It's just tear out and replace. We have some demo and saw cutting of existing concrete because we are changing the front of the building a little bit and changing some of the structure of the building. Okay? So the first thing, aside from mobilization, and some of you actually picked this up, put mobilization in there. I didn't really expect you to do that, but putting up the temporary fence, getting the job trailer in there, getting the job site sign put up, posting the permit, getting temporary power in there. Those are some examples of things that we do at mobilization. So at this point, we're past mobilization. We've got our temporary fence up, and we're getting ready to start demo. But since we're going to go in and we're going to be cutting out some of the roof for that courtyard, we're going to be demoing out some of these columns because they're in places where we're going to have some new interior framing and walls. We have to go through and shore up the building. So when I say shore up, what am I talking about?
Provide support.
Yeah, we've got to provide support for the structural pieces that we're taking out. So the first thing you got to do before you start demoing any of that out is shoring it up. So I think this is a few pages back. We did start doing a little bit of demo ahead of time, just to keep from standing there, some demo that wasn't tearing down structure. But see, we shored it up. That's what all of these are. They're going to go up there and brace some of these steel pieces and all that before we start going and cutting this steel beam out and cutting out roof deck. We don't want to go out and rip up the structure and the whole thing cave in on us, right? So we had to do some shoring first. After shoring, then we can do all of this demo that we're talking about. Okay, we have a lot of demo in this building. We're going to cut out some roof deck. We're going to cut out quite a bit of concrete. We're going to rip the whole front of the building off.
Did that shoring have to be engineered?
We did have our structural engineer approve it for us. It wasn't as like we didn't have to have a whole plan. We just went over with him what we were going to do. So my demo crew actually was the one that provided the shoring, and then that company instead submitted a shop drawing. We just sent the shop drawing to him. Engineered, he didn't require us to have it stamped by an engineer. Okay.
Do you expect us to list all of the things that fall under demolition?
Not necessarily, okay. In fact, I just put demolition. Now I did separate out demolition and concrete saw cutting and removal, but there's a lot of demo. If you just got demo down, because actually I had one crew come out and do all of the demo work, They actually contracted my shoring. They're the ones that took out all of the structural steel pieces, cut the roof deck out, did my saw cutting for me, tore all this exterior brick, so I just called it demo. Alright? I was gonna try to, okay, so see here is where, they started cutting the deck off the front. You remember this whole front gets demoed out. I'll skip to my lid a little bit, and we took a lot of pictures. So. At this, okay, so here's the 20-foot by 40-foot roof came out. All right, at this point, they had not demoed out this steel beam that goes across there. Okay, so here they're starting to tear off the front of the building. That we had some awnings there. A lot of demo at the front. All of that's coming down. All that comes down. If you look at that demo plan on the foundation, you'll remember all of this slab and foundation comes out. This whole front comes out, and that all gets rebuilt with new. Here we go. Here's a picture pretty much. This is pretty much after the whole front of the building is tore down. Okay? Now, we still have that one, that's a concrete column, and it's supporting this steel I-beam that comes out. We still have a little bit of work here to do to make a temporary pad so they could shore that up back behind there and cut all of that out. So that's demo. Alright? Now after demo, we did have a lot of saw cutting on the floor. Get rid of some concrete slab. So that's the slab that's foundation that's cut out under that courtyard. So a lot of demo. After the concrete was demoed out, so you see here where we went through and we were laying out for our new columns and piers. So what comes up next are these helical piers. That's what this rig comes out. It's drilling down. It's creating those helical piers for us. I'm going to find one that looks a little more done. I've got a picture of that. Trying to show you a finished one. Okay, so that's pretty much a finished helical pier after they've drilled it down. Now, what happens now, this will get cut off and it'll get prepped for a concrete cap. If you looked at those plans, you probably saw that there were something like 10 or 12 of those helical piers. That's more like what it looks like when it's finished. They put that cap on it there, and then we pour a concrete cap. They had one of those prepped. Put the concrete pier cap. Well, I must have missed my picture for the concrete pier cap. So then, after those concrete piers, now it's time to do all of our under slab utility work. So we had to saw cut out for all of these trenches for our sewer lines. We have sanitary sewer in there. We have stormwater in there. So if you remember, the roof drains come down that back courtyard wall, go in that. The courtyard drains pick up into that sanitary, and it's ran all the way from the front of the building. So we had a lot of, under slab plumbing, sanitary sewer, and, storm sewer. Now as well, and I don't know if we'll see it all, but there is underground electrical in there because we have a lot of floor plugs. Okay, also, if there is outlets in an interior wall that doesn't go floor to ceiling, because they can run the conduit overhead and drop it down into a wall. But if there's nowhere to, if the wall doesn't go floor to ceiling, then they would have to come with the electrical up into that wall. Okay, so there is some underground electrical work. So we've done shoring, we've done demo, installed our helical piers, under slab utilities, under slab plumbing, under slab electrical, and now we're going to prep all of this concrete to go back in. We're going to pour back, they're going to fill in all these trenches once we have the inspections. You don't have to put inspections. I'm not expecting you to put inspections on this. You can if you want, but once we have all those inspections, then that all gets backfilled, it all gets prepped and ready for the pour back for the concrete. So now we have our concrete work. We're still under slab, under slab, under slab. Here's a picture of them prepping for the concrete pier caps. So where those helical piers went, they're going to support some structure. Most likely where a new steel column is going to come down. So here they're prepping for all this concrete pour back. Sorry, like I said, we took a lot of pictures. Okay, here we go. Now, we're prepping. We're getting all of our vapor barrier in. You can see we're getting in all the rebar, getting this all ready to pour back. Okay? Get that all poured back. Get to where we have some concrete on the floor. Looks like we're already starting to get some structural steel back in there before the slab. Oh, that's not structural steel, that's been running RTE, so. We'll get some concrete in there. Now we're starting to pour some concrete back. So here's where we're pouring back some of the, around the courtyard. So look, you see that first lower level had already been poured back. Now they're forming out all these around the edges, footers there. Form back. Here's some pretty concrete. It's been put back. Now this is most of it's been put back. Looks like I see these structural steel columns in place, so I passed up some work. So now if I zero in there, you'll see that we've done at this point already put in the new structural steel support and new columns. so I missed some things as we went there, but all new concrete work. Now we have our slab back. You can see where our plumbing stub ups are coming through there. You can see some electrical stub ups coming out. Alright, so at this point now we've done our concrete work and our structural steel. Now, we don't always separate, and so we're going to start talking about MEPs and framing here in just a minute. So we don't always do separate out overhead rough end from in-wall rough end, and especially if you all, some of you are more familiar with residential, they pretty much get all of the framing done, and then the MEPs come in and start running all of their work. Sometimes in commercial, well, actually a lot of times, we'll do all of the overhead rough ends first, and then start getting the walls put in place. So you get your overhead, electrical, if there's any plumbing overhead, fire sprinkler, there's no fire sprinkler here, fire alarm, conduits, get all put up above before we start our framing on our walls. Also at this point, looks like we did get a little bit ahead. See the light gauge steel or framing, light gauge metal framing studs along those perimeter walls. Looks like I moved ahead and let the framers start working before we got our interior walls all put in. So exterior walls all put in. So we're already starting to frame up some interior space there. Okay, so at this point, now that we have slab, structural steels in, we do have a little bit of framing going on. I've got my MEPs coming up next to start installing ductwork and overhead electrical. There is some overhead plumbing in this one too. So by the way, I'm giving you a lot of hints about scope of work for your schedule. Alright, so exterior walls framing comes up next. So, in order to keep things moving along, we did some interior, they went ahead and started on some interior walls. But you typically would get your exterior walls framed up first. So, they're just supposed to do some availability and time for them to go ahead and start in on some out of the way. Okay, so these courtyard walls are exterior walls. So that's what you're seeing here. We're seeing some exterior walls going up. Also, along the front of the building, these are exterior walls. See, they're framing in my new parapet here, and some of these are the exterior walls that go along the front. After that, we're going to start seeing some sheathing go in place. We got our exterior walls, and we're getting our sheathing in place. Start to see, here's some of that ductwork I was talking about coming. It's going to be up in the overhead. Start to see some wood sheathing go in place. Some of it's Dinslush, some of it we have wood sheathing. So we get this wood sheathing or this exterior sheathing in place. After, somewhere along in here, after we get exterior walls framed up, this little space right over here is for our exterior roll-up overhead door. I actually think that we had a mess up on fabrication, so typically when we start getting all these exterior walls framed in, we'll start getting in our exterior doors and things put in as well. So we would have had that. I think we'll see it later on down the road. Okay? Any questions about where we're getting so far? All
I
right?
have a question about,
Yep.
okay, so, you know, the site utilities, those,
Site utilities, so like you're saying, in a ground up situation, we've done excavation, all that.
so, and then you run the plumbing, whatever electrical, if there's gonna be any, right?
Okay, so site utilities and under slab utilities,
That's what
they're two different things.
That's what I'm.
Okay, so site utilities are usually done by a utility contractor, and those are the main legs that tie into like the city. Okay, so they'll set your transformer, they'll tie in your main gas, they'll tie in your, bring your hookup to the fire. Some municipalities have a separate domestic water and a separate, fire water system. And all of those things, all those, gas lines, all that are done by a utilities contractor, okay? And what they typically will do is bring those up to 5 foot of the building pad, okay? Then when it's time to do your under slabs, your plumber and your electrician and all that, they'll make those connections, okay? So the electrician doesn't always run all the way back to the transformer. So they'll bring your primary, your utility contractor will bring your primary into the transformer, and then the secondaries will come from the transformer all in. The sewer line connections and the domestic water and all that, they'll come within 5 feet of the building pad. The fire riser, however, usually the utility contractor brings that all the way to the riser room and up. Okay, your, fire sprinkler contractor will connect in the riser room. Okay, they don't go to the 5 foot outside the building. Typically, I'm talking about typical situations. Okay, but you can think of that as the site utilities contractor, but then your electrician, your plumber, those folks, they pick it up at the building. Okay, they make those connections. Okay?
Excavation was following demo, and
Say again?
excavation was following demo. After demo was excavation for this.
When we say excavation, we're talking about the big site excavation. all
Okay,
right?
not for utilities.
Like for utilities, getting your site graded out, getting your access roads, that's excavation. You know, we have drainage swells and all that.
Okay, we have them before. Okay.
Right. In this project, we didn't have that. This is a remodel. This is an existing building. Okay, so the only excavation that you have
Yeah.
is what the concrete guys have to excavate out to do their
Utilities.
footings and things. Okay, so that's handled by the concrete folks. Okay, that's not a whole earthwork contractor that's coming to do that. Okay,
Okay.
you get it?
It means that excavation was following after demo. The floor demolition, the concrete
Okay,
floor.
so again, we didn't have excavation on this project.
Okay, we don't put, okay.
Okay,
But-
now we did have concrete work on this project. So after the demo, then we had concrete work. Alright? So saying excavation, it doesn't really fit on this project because we didn't have an earthwork contractor. Okay? You follow me? I mean, you have some digging work to do, but that's for the
Do we
concrete
need to-
footings and the forming up.
Do we need to put some work for these utilities under
You can call that so you do have
Concrete.
under slab utilities.
utility?
Okay, that's handled by your plumber and your electrician, and you have concrete work. Okay? Everybody
Yeah.
got that? Okay, alright. I know that can get confusing a little bit. It confused me for a while, but you figure it out. Okay? Alright. So most of the time, if you have a civil plan, that's when you have an earthwork contractor and a utilities contractor. Okay? This project didn't have a
civil thing other than a little bit of parking lot work that we need on it. It had 1 page of civil.
Okay? So now where are we? Alright, after we get all of our exterior walls framed in, then you have to do all of your waterproofing time. Okay? So make sure we got waterproofing in there. This didn't necessarily have to fall in this order, but we had some roof work. Okay? Now, in a ground up construction, you're typically gonna have all that work in your exterior walls and your structural steel goes in, or your structural steel goes in, your roof deck goes in, and then your exterior walls, and then you'll do the roof, right? Because you're trying to get to drying. So you can do all of the MEP work on the inside. This already had an existing roof. It was just a roof replacement. So we didn't necessarily have to do the roof in that order, because we're already dried in. But we did get the roof work done after exterior walls like typical. Okay? Now, this is kind of specific to this project, but before we got all of the interior walls and everything, if you remember, if you looked through all of this exposed structure, this is the ceiling under the deck, all of this exposed structural here gets painted. So we wanted to get this all painted while the floor was still empty before we started getting all those interior walls put in. Now, I've already told you, we already had started getting the exterior perimeters in there and doing some work, just for the sake of time. But we pretty much have the floor all open. That way, they can go through, they can spray that ceiling kind of uninterrupted and not worry about getting paint on other people's work. Now this is a dry fall paint. Have you ever heard of dry fall paint? So when it sprays up, it has so much, like if it's a 20-foot ceiling or a 16-foot ceiling, you get a dry fall paint that dries before it hits a certain level. So then all you're getting is dust on the floor. It's just some paint dust. You're not getting wet paint down and everything. So it's pretty good to know.
It's typically about 12 feet.
12 feet for dry fall. So that would have been good for here, because I think I'd have to look at the plans, but I think we had 16 feet. I'm not sure. So that was plenty to keep from getting wet paint all over everything. So you do that when you're spraying those sealants, dry fall paint. All right. So at this point in the schedule, part of our scope was paint the underside. All right. Underside of the ceiling. Now that we have our exterior walls in place, who can tell me what you think comes in next? What fills in the gaps in the exterior walls? We're not all closed in yet.
Window doors.
Storefronts, right? We start getting the storefronts in. Now, if I do this a lot, if there's a longer lead time on glass than on frames, depending upon how much storefront I have, I'll go ahead and move forward with storefront and plywood it in. Just put some panels in there. That way we can continue on the inside and I don't have to wait for glass, right? So that's what we did on this one. We didn't have to plywood panel it because it was set, because remember we have that big ramp along the front, and there's the exterior brick wall, and that's, so our storefront was actually set way far in with the roof over, so we didn't have to like plywood panel it. We just put some plastic sheeting up
Do you have pictures of that?
of the storefront. They may be a while on down the road here. Skylight, we started some brickwork.
started the storefront before you did the brickwork before you did the storefront? Okay.
So, sometimes those frames go on brickwork. These were actually inset into the brickwork. So I think where we got ahead of it, we had to come back and like trim out. So they could inset that. Well, I'll show you some storefront pictures when we get to it.
No worries.
So you can see here, we're already plastered. So, I skipped ahead a little bit, hold on. So, storefront and glass probably had a delay. I would typically have it in here now. Interior wall framing after. I have a note in here because of those glass Italia doors, they're a mud-in frame. So we had those installed before we drywall first side. After the interior walls are framed and we had those glass Italia mud-in frames in place, then we drywall first side, okay? Why do we sometimes drywall first side and not just wait?
You said one side? Well,
So it's a way to actually start getting ahead a little bit in the schedule. I mean, you don't necessarily have to, and like I said, quite a few times in residential, if it's a smaller residential, they don't drywall one side. They do all the framing and do all of the MEPs in the wall, and then they come and drywall all the sides, both sides. So you gotta do insulation and all that. So in commercial, a lot of times, so we can keep things moving along, once the interior walls are framed, we drywall one side, right? Because you can still do your electrical work and your plumbing work in the walls with drywall on one side. So we drywall one side, and kind of think of it as that assembly line, all right? You get your wall framing thrown up, as soon as the framing's up, and sometimes even before framing's finished out, they're coming right behind and drywall one side. Once that's one-sided, then the MEP guys can start doing their rough in-wall roughing. Okay? So drywall first side. Also threw in there miscellaneous wood blocking. So where you have metal studs, even when you have wood studs, right? You go through and you put blocking in where you're gonna hang cabinetry, where you're gonna hang bathroom partitions, where you're gonna have bathroom hardware, you know, that kind of thing. Anything that you're gonna need some backing in there, you'll go through and do all that wood blocking. So I have wood blocking in there. Now I have the electrical wall rough-in and the plumbing in wall rough-in, okay? At this point, now that we have a roof done, we're gonna go ahead and let the HVAC, so all that overhead is done. Plumbing, electrical, and ductwork overhead is done. The electricians and the plumbers are now starting on the walls. We'll have our HVAC guy go ahead and set the RTUs. Now, since this was a remodel, it's a little different. I mean, a lot of times you set those curbs. When you're doing that roof work, you have all that ready. They may not have the RTUs set in place, but we have some work to do up there to get the curbs in place, right? Framed in and put in place. And when I talk about a curb, that's it's kind of, think of it like the stage that your rooftop HVAC unit's gonna sit on. All right, but the roofing all gets tied into all that, so none of it leaks. All that good stuff. So while the electricians and plumbers are working on the end wall, I have my HVAC guys doing the equipment, the RTUs. Okay. Fire alarm. So here's something about fire alarm. If you find a fire alarm contractor that will run the conduit, send me their phone number, because usually what I end up with is always a change order with my, electrician if I don't think ahead to do this, because fire alarm guys won't run the conduits for their wire. So I usually end up getting my electricians to do it. Now, certain types of fire alarm wire, you don't have to run it in conduit, so it might be, if it's not required by code for that particular building, then it might just be owner preference. But if you're gonna have conduit, make sure you get your electricians to run that conduit for the fire alarm. So we have fire alarm rough ends. Alright, now that we got all these rough ends done, we're not gonna close up the ceiling because it's all exposed and painted, but we are gonna close up walls. We have to get all those inspections. Once you have your MEP inspections, your rough end inspections, then what can we do? All that end wall is inspected now.
Insulation?
Insulation. You have a framing inspection, and then you have insulation. I don't think I talked about it in this class. I think I talked about it in scheduling. Why will they not do the framing inspection until the MEP inspections are all completed? What was that?
Boring holes in everything.
Right, because sometimes those guys cut holes in everything, right? Wood framing, they'll just notch it out, alright? So they may end up creating weak spots in the framing, so the framing inspector, which is a lot of times the building inspector, unless they have a special inspector for that, but most municipalities, it's your building inspector that's gonna come out and inspect your framing, will not even come out to do that inspection until all of your MEPs are filed. Or, MEP rough ends are filed. Okay? Alright, so now you have that, insulation, now what are we gonna do? We already did first side, now we're gonna do second side, okay? You can close those walls up. That's usually a, milestone in your schedule. Closing the walls up. Because after we close the walls up, what do we get to start in on? Your finishes, right? So now we're gonna joint the tape bed. Gonna start getting primer on there. So now we're catching up to where we are here. If you remember on these exterior perimeter walls, they're plastered, but they're only plastered up to 8 feet or so. And then we have a regular, and then it's drywall, level 5 drywall up above. Or I guess they did that to save money. Closing up the walls. Looks like we have a lot of interior brickwork going on. I'm sure exterior brickwork is either going on at the same time or directly after. Interior plaster, interior masonry and stone. Somebody, I can't remember what class, caught the fireplace. I wasn't even really expecting you to catch the fireplace, but somebody caught that, so we need to get that little ethanol fireplace in place. After the brickwork is done on the inside of the building, I wanted to wait until all of this masonry was done. Then we can do the grind and the polish on the concrete floors. Alright? I didn't want to do that with them still doing brickwork in there because that's still a lot of dust and scraping and dropping brick and all of that. So after all that interior brickwork was installed, then grind and polish the concrete floors. Most of you missed this scope of work. There is tile on the walls in the bathrooms. There's not tile on the floor, there's tile on the walls in the bathrooms. Okay? most of you caught this, installing interior doors. On this project, I actually separated out the specialty glass Italia doors and then just regular, interior doors. There's not many regular interior doors. Install millwork comes up. I can't show you any pictures of millwork because as of right now, there still is no millwork in this project. All of their millwork is coming from suppliers that they're gonna sell, so it's like gonna be displaced. They still don't have any millwork in there. So, but it was supposed to have the millwork installed, countertops installed. Once those things are in, now we can finalize any interior paint, interior trim and interior paint. There's not a lot of trim. There is a wood slab and it's recessed flush. So this drywall, this plaster, and that trim is all flushed out. You just have a little reglet in between there. Kind of like, so you see this control joint. Those reglets are just a little metal piece that creates a little inset there to divide those materials. It's kind of a modern look. Okay. After interior paint, now we can go in and we can start putting in all of our trim, our MEP trims, right? We can get all the switch plates, all of the outlet covers, all of the plumbing fixtures, all of our fire alarm trim outs, all this. We don't have drop ceiling in this project, it's all exposed ceiling. There is some chipboard ceiling in some of those interior spaces, but most of this is painted exposed. Okay, so now we've got all our MEP finish out. There's a lot of electrical finish out. Okay, I'm saying this because a lot of you did not give near enough time. So think of this as, well, you don't have to think of it, you should actually know this, but think of a 12,000 square foot furniture showroom. The whole entire thing is track lot, track lot, track lot, track lot, track lot, track lot. I mean, this whole space is full of lighting. Directional lighting, track lighting, all kinds of lighting. So some of you said, 5 or 10 days on electrical. No, it's more like 45 days. Okay. On top of all of that, all of the fixtures, you also have your lighting control system where they have it. It's all computerized, and it's all in that dock, loading dock area where they have programmers that come out and program all of this lighting. So there's a lot of electrical finish out work in this one. Okay. Plumbing, not so much. There's 1, 2, 3 restrooms, and like I said, we didn't even have millwork, so no dishwashers, no sinks or anything like that. We just had to cap those off in the wall. Okay. Decorative hardware. So once you get all of the doors and all of those things in place, you have all of your hardware that has the door hardware, floor stops, all of that, toilet accessories. There weren't any partitions in these restrooms, but you did have toilet paper holders and all of that kind of thing. So some decorative hardware. If you had millwork, then we would have had cabinet pulls and all of that kind of decorative hardware put on. So just for your thinking and your scheduling out and scoping out a project. Now I'm gonna skip to the exteriors. That was kind of our track that finished out the interior. Now you have to think, once you have your exterior walls in place, roof in place and all that, then your work kind of splits interior and exterior. These works typically go on at the same time. Alright, so exterior work that we had to finish out. We had our exterior masonry. We had all those concrete planters outside. They needed to be waterproof, filled with dirt, all of that. The courtyard pedestal tile. Here's some of those things I was talking about. So, out in that courtyard, had this pedestal tile. That's exterior work. That's a paver system. We talked about this. That slab drops down underneath those tiles, and there's floor drains down there. That's all waterproof with TPO, like a roof. So this is exterior space in the middle of that building. Water comes down, it just runs down in between these tiles, hits those floor drains, and goes out to the sanitary sewer, or the storm sewer out the front parking lot. So that's exterior work that needed to be completed. Courtyard fountain. It actually got deleted, but you all didn't know that, so you should have that exterior work on your scope of work. Exterior plaster. The ceiling soffit above that ramp where those exterior roof hangs over into that in that exterior space. The soffit under that was plaster. Hope that you might have caught that. Exterior paint work, and now we have, I don't know if you caught this or not, I don't think most of you did. Barbara, there's your storefronts. Is that what you wanted to see?
Oh, yeah.
That's at the courtyard, inside going out to the courtyard. Let's see. This is the storefront in that dock area. It's really those windows, but it's all part of this storefront system. This is that conference room, so exterior space, walking up that ramp to the front entryway, this room. So this is all considered exterior wall, so it's a storefront system here. But what I'm trying to get to is the parking lot work. Not a great picture. Not necessarily a great picture, but so all of this concrete outside is new. Trying to find a picture that kind of gives you a better shot of that. That's better. By the way, those storm lines that come, I told you the roof drains tie in and the courtyard floor drains, and then it runs all the way out to the front parking lot. These are where that daylight's out. Right there. All that roof drainage and the water in that courtyard that goes through those tiles comes out right here. This is probably the best picture of the lot I can give you. So we cut out all this old parking lot because it was cracked up and in bad shape. So we cut all that out, prepped this. that they asked that we did this work at the very end, after we're completely finished, people are pretty much finished, trades are finished coming in and going, so they wanted to look as new as possible. And then, you see we have our civil signing, like for handicap parking, parking lot striping, that type of thing. So, that was the scope of work that needed to be done. Dock bumpers. Those were in there, new dock bumpers. And then this stairs was very late. We got sent to the wrong place, but I do think we have a picture of those stairs. Maybe. There's with the dock stairs, trees in place, planting in place, so we did have a little bit of, so, see, this is the road out there. This is what the parking lot looked like, it was awful. And so we cut out in front of their store and made new parking, alright? Now, they're pretty minimalistic, that's the sign for the store, Avenue Road, right there. So, I hope you see, and I know, like I said, some of you don't have a whole lot of experience of catching all of these things, but some of these things are things that you probably should have caught by now, especially if I had some people that missed interior wall framing. That's pretty much any project you do is gonna have interior wall framing and all of that. So, that was a pretty high level, well, not necessarily high level, that had some detail. If you pick up all the scope that we just talked about in your schedule, hopefully you took some notes, then you should be okay. Alright? I hope that going over some of these things, maybe reminded you of some things, or maybe some things that you had missed altogether. So it should put you on the right track. Okay, any questions about the scope? Okay, so I did, I went over some things like the masonry, interior masonry and exterior masonry. If you caught masonry brickwork, you got credit for that. I didn't expect you to separate it out, the interior from the exterior. In your schedule, you might have to separate it out a little bit. Interior masonry, and then go to the outside, or exterior masonry and go to the inside, right? Because it's one crew. Unless it's a really big crew for a project this size, and they didn't send me a crew large enough to do the interior and the exterior at the same time. Okay? Alright, what's the questions?
So you're saying that you said with interior and exterior masonry, on the schedule, we put interior masonry and then how long it would take and then drop down and put exterior.
Yeah. I would probably like when you get to that point in your schedule, I would probably separate, for the sake of time, right? Separate out your interior work from your exterior work. Alright, so when you do that, you kind of create a gap between interior and exterior masonry, but you can do it continuous. They can start at this date, and if it's 20 days interior masonry, when they finish that, they can skip right to the exterior. So they're on site in one continuous time. They're just not doing interior and exterior at the same time. That's kind of splitting the hairs there. What else? Okay. Class is over in 10 minutes, but this is open. The campus is open till 10, so I mean it's your time. Feel free to stay. before you go, alright, this is, your schedule is due this coming Sunday.